Everybody's heard the story about how Christopher Columbus convinced the King and Queen of Spain that he could reach the riches of the Orient by sailing west because the world was round. At this point, we also know that Columbus was not the first European to reach the New World. In a new book, David Boyle argues that Columbus was among a group of men, though, who figured out a way to translate exploration into wealth and power. A business plan, if you will, a plan that very quickly came to rely on slavery when it was put into effect. Boyle's book is called Toward the Setting Sun, Columbus, Cabot, Vespucci, and the Race for America. And you begin your book not in 1492 in Spain, but half a century earlier in Constantinople.
Well, it was the fall of Constantinople to the Turks in 1453 that cut off Western traders from the Silk Road and from the traditional ways in which they had traded with the East. And so it was kind of the reason people started looking to the West, and sort of dreamers like Columbus came along and said, well, maybe we can just go over the Atlantic and China will be on the other side. So that was the beginning, I think, of the big idea.
And the big idea, as you describe it, was not so much discovery, it was wealth and power.
Well, I think so. I think what I've tried to do is to write it as one story, and I think there's been a sort of tendency over the centuries, really, for historians to focus on one or other of those sort of three pioneers or others, and write their story separately. And often, there are sort of national interests involved. The Italians very interested in Vespucci, and the British very interested in Cabot, and things like that. And their story has not really been woven together before, but it was one story, and they knew each other, or certainly knew of each other. Columbus and Vespucci were friends and colleagues. But what Columbus and Cabot did, I think, was to come up with an idea of how you sort of go over there and you make a vast profit. If it had worked, a vast profit, they would have been very rich.
Oh, sure, I can talk with you. I just heard the author refer early on to Columbus as a dreamer, and I think it's really important to remember that he also was responsible, he and his men, for the murder of up to 3 million Arawak Indians on the island of Hispaniola. And so his history of introducing genocide to the continent is much more important than his dreaming capabilities in terms of sailing, at least in terms of the ethical history of his legacy.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. Certainly, it doesn't mean that he wasn't a dreamer. He certainly was a dreamer. But, these were dangerous dreams and a dangerous position that he got into. A century later, you had Spanish campaigners like Bartolomé de las Casas claiming that 40 million people had died in the New World because of the discovery. And these are really staggering figures, and genocide is certainly not too small a word. To be fair to the Spanish, actually, the Spanish authorities did try, perhaps not hard enough, to limit the damage that was being done, which the English never did. They never did even try, I think. But wherever there were discoveries, there was also slavery and or brutality.
Thank you for making it clear. Celebrating Columbus, to me, is something like, flying a flag and celebration of the Holocaust, and these holidays should be abolished.